I trained as an architect. I'm a self-taught artist. And you have to remember, if no one's ever done architecture training, but when I was doing it in the 60s, it was all straight lines and black and white. And very, very constraining. And I always loved very elaborate things. So when I started to make things and began a life as an artist, I just collected things, and I love what I would call, or what Dougie Fields, my friend, would call maximalism, not minimalism. That's gone and dead. We're maximalists, which means really one layer on top of another. The portrait of Zandra Rhodes came about. I had lost my last studio, I think in a fire in the late 70s, and we were lodgers in her house in St. Stephen's Gardens. And I was working in her attic, which didn't have a floor. So to me, this seemed the perfect opportunity to do a portrait of Zandra, because there she was, the sitter, right on where I was living. So this began, and she would come up to the attic, climb up the ladder, and there was no staircase, and sit there for, well, a couple of hours. But I'm afraid Zandra did have a tendency to go to sleep. So she would start nodding off, and then I'd have to use the matchsticks and wake her up. But we eventually got it done, and I suppose the one that you see now represents that period, which I think someone always described it as made from pink bubble gum, and I do think that is actually a rather good description of it. The materials I use really come from all over the world. I mean, I've been working as a sculptor now in glass and mirror for over 32 years. So you find a lot just arrives, but there's a thin glass that I get from Thailand, which they use on the temples. And then there's painted glass as well. And then I work with a man in the East End of London who also coats glass for me. And the mirror is much thinner than normal mirror, because obviously you don't make mirror thin, because otherwise it would smash, which is what people don't want, which I support very much. Working with Lynn Seymour was very, very close. With all my sitters, really, I believe very much, as I always say to my sitters, I am going to take part of your soul. So for me, it's a collaborative process whereby you both work together. So, for instance, I might be working on the nose, it might have grown too long, and I'll say to Lynn, oh, what do you think? Oh, she said too long, so then I, chop it off. And this process really goes from the very beginning, from the first clay thing. To me, I don't like the idea of someone just sitting there rather pompously and you're sculpting away. It's a collaboration. It must be a collaboration. I can't see how else you can get a portrait of someone. You need to work together. And then when it came later on and we were working on the metal work, I'll never forget Lynn we were bending the metal, and she suddenly said, no, this drape isn't quite right. And she leapt on the piece and pulled it and smashed it with her. So yes, it was a truly collaborative process. The way I made the sculpture was Lynn sat for me over a number of sittings for a clay head, i.e. it was a post with a lump of clay on the top, and you model this into a shape of the face. This was then cast in white resin. And on this white resin, I put the hair on, which is painted glass set into another resin. And the eyes are little jewels that you get from a jewellery shop. And I take the backs off the jewels and then paint the colour of Lynn's eyes on the back. And then I set this into resin. And the paint that you see on the face is acrylic paint, because I very much like the idea of the face looking painted as opposed to being fleshy or real. And this combines then into the head. Well, I must say, as an artist, my great passion is colour. I love colour. I suppose my kind of, the most place I feel most at home with is India. As Diana Freeland said, pink is the navy blue of India. And even my studio here is pink and orange and blue and green and many, many colours. For me, my work is about celebration of life, the fact that we're all privileged to be living on this earth. And so colours for me reflect this joy of living.